Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Amplify Your Business. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to incorporate your employees into the business as owners. So how do you transition that as an entrepreneur without losing control of your business, and at the same time making sure that you're creating the incentives that you want within your new employee ownership group? And today's guest is going to tell me about their journey as they started this process a couple of years ago and are still actually in the middle of that. And so welcome to the show, Cory Jodoin from Jen-Col. That's JEN-COL.com. Cory, tell me a little bit about your company.
A little bit about the company. Well, the company's name is Jen-Col Construction. It was incorporated 43 years ago. It started as a family-owned business. My mom and dad started the business, and I came into the business in 2000. Yeah, we do commercial construction all over Alberta. We're moving into BC a little bit, and service municipal and private sector vertical construction.
Excellent. And so the moving recently into the BC marketplace, I know you just told me that you just returned from a ski trip out by Revi. And so Is this so that you have excuse to head out to the mountains a little bit more often?
I'd be for fishing probably more so than the snow sports. But yeah, you know what? I was actually out at one of our jobs in Quesnel site meeting and that and along the way. So, you're going to go right past some snow, you should take advantage of it. So
most definitely. And that's one of the beautiful things about entrepreneurship, right? Is we as entrepreneurs have this ability to blend in some of that work and fun at the same time, or at least hit it on the way. And so it's nice to be able to have that opportunity. And so you guys have been building then, different types of buildings and construction projects across Alberta for how long did you say?
43 years.
43 years. And you came into the business in 2000?
2000.
Okay,
yeah.
So that's 21 years now. So half of the life of the company, you've been involved in it then.
That's a long time.
It certainly is, right? Like
I actually never did that math, so you surprised me with that number.
Okay, so now at what point did you decide that you wanted to have a different model over at Jen-Col where you start to bring in the employees as owners into the company?
The part for me is, you sit down and you look at it and you're going to put all your effort into a business, and it's how do you get out of a business? And, I look at it from my mom and dad. Really started off as a question, and it was, what's your long-term plan for the company? And I asked my dad that, and it wasn't in so many words, but really about, we agreed on an enduring organization, so a company that goes on past me. And so, what that really did is really set a solid foundation of what I'm working, what my goal is the president of the company moving forward is putting the building blocks in place to be able to do that.
Yeah, and so if I'm hearing you correctly, then the foundation was actually laid at the time in which you were having the succession planning discussion with your father and talking about how the company is going to grow beyond you even. And so you guys were almost thinking of the next succession at this time that you were laying the groundwork for your succession.
Yeah, I think I was probably a little bit more instrumental in that. Just from a long-term plan of where we're going and what we're doing and starting with it and moving backwards. And, and the other part to it is, you have three partners in the business, and, I looked after get work. My dad looked after the do work, and my mom looked after the keep score. And when you have founders that are retiring and you're the only one left holding the bag, and you sit down and you look at it and you say, okay, if it took three people to oversee and manage and run this company, and we're growing, what is our work structure got to look like? How do we got to do things differently? Because at the end of the day, I don't want 30 people sitting outside my door asking me for questions and that. So that was part of the process of going through this too, is really putting, a proper structure, an organizational structure in place to be able to scale.
Yeah. Okay. And so you worked on the early days then, when you were taking over the company and building that structure, I'd imagine, and laying that groundwork. Initially, so when you took over, did you have partners then when your parents, stepped back away from the company, or was that something that you brought in partners later on?
I brought in partners later on. So,
Yeah.
you know, um, the business arrangement and agreement that I had with my dad, I wanted that to be finalized and be dealt with. And then at that point, I'd be ready to bring on other partners.
Okay. And so now when you were starting to bring people in with some ownership stake into the company, were those initial partners people who were long-term employees, or did you
Yeah.
bring in some outside talent to begin with to fill some gaps that maybe you had identified with the leaving of your parents and the roles that they had?
Yeah. So I would say that, in the period of years in between there, we um, got all the right people in the right seats and put a lot of the foundational pieces in place. The opportunity was presented to 5 long-term employees that were uh, not only across the company, but depth-wise throughout the company as well. So it's not just at an executive level where we have ownership within our company.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because that's something that a lot of companies, when they're thinking about this, they're usually thinking initially that top level of employees in that
Yeah.
org structure, right? So the executives, the key management team, but you took a step even deeper into the
Yeah.
org structure.
Yeah, in the first go around I did.
Okay.
Not only did I go across, but I went down. I do believe the top people in your company have to be vested in, to have an employee ownership model. The top people making decisions within your company have to be involved in it. They have to believe in it and buy in it. They have to be entrepreneurial.
Yeah, for sure. Now, walk me just through your decision as to why you wanted these people, to take some ownership stake in the company. What were some of the motivating factors? You mentioned just succession potentially, right? So you have an exit
Yeah.
strategy at some point, so you're selling the company in pieces to the employees. But beyond that, was there any other motivation there too?
Yeah, first thing is I wanted time. The one thing you cannot buy. I wanted to be able to have more time to be able to do, you a younger family. So time with kids, time with my spouse, time with family. So I wanted to be able to have some time. I wanted to be able to. The motivational factor for me really is I really wanted Jen-Col to be, so our core purpose is to build a better future, and it really lines up with what our purpose is. And I believe that, when you come in and you are, a highly capable, highly motivated person who has the right attributes and competencies in that you're driven to succeed more, and you want ownership of something to some degree, whether it's true share value of ownership, but you want the accountability and the responsibility that goes with it. And so, my worldview is if you're going to give accountability and responsibility with it, you may as well provide some of the upside with it as well. I mean, at the end of the day, if something were to happen to me, I don't want to burden my wife and my kids with, a business that, my wife isn't actively involved in the business, and you're going to rely on them anyways to wrap up affairs or wind up affairs. And, to me, excuse me, I just feel it would be a shame, where you have a company that's been in business this long, and from lack of planning or succession, where, it's got a full tent and providing opportunities for other people just because a founder gets sick or something happens.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point that you make there, because I think that is one that a lot of people, when they're thinking about, bringing employees into to the ownership table, they're often thinking in terms of, okay, well, I've got key employees I don't want to lose. And so it's from this place of trying to hold on to employees. So I'll give them a little bit of ownership. And so they're going to be a little bit more committed. Maybe they're going to, like you said, kind of step up and take more responsibility and be more accountable and so on. And so you're trying to almost buy that your approach was very different in the sense where you're really started out by saying like, look, I want these people to be bought in. And so they should be benefiting from that. And in that process, getting the upside of that, the full upside of that. And then also, I love this forward thinking that you have in terms of that, just the company needing to stay alive through it. Like it is a shame to see a 40+ year company fold up tent if something were to happen to the one guy who's kind of controlling it all. Yeah. So that's a really interesting point. I never thought about it in that way. I've often thought about Amplimedia in terms of, I wonder what would happen, upon my departure if something were to happen to me. Like, how would we transition that, or how would those left behind, and how should I structure things in that regard? The ownership model is definitely a good way to do that. So I love the insight there. Thank you very much for that, Cory. Now, so you right now, then, are you still at the 5 that you brought in initially, plus yourself as being the ownership team?
Yeah. So I did an initial share offering at the beginning, and this January I sold some more shares to some of the existing group, but part of it's a learning curve. If you think starting a business is a learning curve, it is exactly the same thing on bringing in other partners. It's a learning curve. And so there's a plan behind it. There's a method behind it. Wanted to stay, small, go through it, and then, increase that opportunity over time and expand it as you learn how to manage it and operate it and govern it, I guess, is the best way of putting it. At the end of the day, you're asking people to put some skin into the game and go through, and they want to make sure that it's a well-managed, well-run company. And, the other part is, when you go across and you go down within your company, we're a very transparent company, but there's other parts to owning a business that you get exposed to, an understanding of all of that. And so starting small and being able to explain that concept, and if we pull this lever, here's what happens. If we touch this lever, here's what happens over here from a business end of it. You need to understand that from your partners need to understand that as well, because I want them to drive the business. I want them to understand the business. I want them to be able to have impact on the business. And in order for them to be able to do that, they've got to have the full picture of what that takes. And, I was fortunate. I came in, my mom and dad taught that, showed that, trained that, went through, and it takes a lot of time, right? It's every one of you who's a business owner, tell me you don't know more today than what you did at the beginning when you started. And it's the same thing. You have a new person on a new journey, and it's exciting for them, but they have to understand how it works.
Yeah.
And I guess having said that, that's for our model, because this isn't, I have true employee ownership where they have an opportunity for equity gain within the business. If this was simply a profit sharing model of you have X amount of shares and, hey, I'll give you some shares, or you earn some shares and your bonus is dependent on share, that's not an ownership model. That's just a bonus structure plan.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about the way that you did structure it then. How do you decide what percentage of your shares you're going to sell and when? I'm curious to know, kind of how you work through that in your mind.
It's still a work in progress.
Okay.
I guess it's like anything, right? So when you start, had a business valuation done on the business, had a value set. First and foremost, I guess I'm going to sit and say this. I hired the absolute best people that I could find who've done this before on giving me advice on how to set this up. So, great taxation lawyer and corporate lawyer on being able to go through and present different options and really walk you through it. Any of these programs could be set up. What I've learned is there's a multitude of different ways of doing it. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. It's what is it you want? How do you want to go through it and do it? And how is it structured for you? So you walk through that, and that took, probably about a year. And part of it is great. You have this model that you think for you works great. What do your partners think of this model to a degree on being able to go through? Because you can spend a whole whack of money to go through and say, hey, this is the perfect plan and here's how it's going to work, and you have nobody who wants in. It's a two-way street, and it really, from a starting point, from a creation and getting it off the ground. Once it's off the ground and you have people in it, well, the structure is there and the structure's set, and here's how it is for other people. But to conceive it from the ground up and set it through, there's a lot of things. So one, go out and, the advice I would give is hire the best you can from professionals who do that. Talk to a lot of other people on who went through and did this. There's very few people out there who've done this who I haven't talked to about what went well, what didn't go well, what would you do over again, what would you do over again, and you try and pick the best of. At the end of the day, you're just trying to do the best thing possible for everybody, and it's got to be set up to be a win-win situation. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And we've all seen companies like that where you have the small implosion or things that happen, or big implosion that happens with it. And it's about being, I think it really boils down on being really very, very clear on your purpose, on your values, how you look at things, and making sure that, values align and purpose aligns in going through, and then it becomes relatively easy. But if you're not clear on the end outcome you want, how are you going to decide on how to set it up properly at the beginning? Mm-hmm. You're going to end up with a different outcome.
Yeah. So when you were setting this all up to begin with, did you have a time horizon where you went, okay, so I'm at 100% ownership today, and this is where the timeline goes to when I need to be fully divested?
Do I have a plan? Yeah, we sat down, we modeled it out till I'm 65. We sat down and we looked at, and it's a complex model on sitting down, because part of it is, what percentage you plan on the company growing? What percentage do you have to, if the company's still growing in value, which every one of your shareholders wants, you've got to, what you're starting with and how much you've got to sell changes over time. So, my goal is my goal is to sell to the right people at the right time. I'm not really set on a percentage, but I only have so many years left, and so I probably realistically have to do at least 5% per year by the time I get out. And realistically, you want that. If you're growing your business and you're developing your people and you have great talent coming in, they're going to want it. So you better be prepared to sell. If you're going to put this, it's one of those, it's kind of an all-in move. When you go and do this, you better be clear that this is what I'm doing and this is how it's going to look and go through, because other people, not everybody, but there are people who are going to want that opportunity. And if you're sitting there holding all the cards and you're not ready, and you're going to wait till 60 or 65 to sit down and going through and do this, might not have time, right? That's the other thing. How many people, well, and my dad's an example. I won't talk about other businesses, but my dad, company grew past where he pictured it was going to be. If my dad, when he finally figured out he was going to retire, decided he was going to retire, had to go and find someone, then what?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. You don't want to be scrambling right at the last moment. That's when you're going to be,
Yep.
just taking what you can, like in terms of offers or whatever, and potentially having to fold up the tent, like you said before. So
You know, you know what's interesting to this is I remember coming in thinking, my Lord, this is taking so much time. Why is this taking so much time? And now I'm in the exact same spot my dad was, probably at about the same age. And I'm thinking, man, this takes time. It does take a lot of time to set it up properly and go through it and
yeah,
communicate, think it out, plan it out and communicate it. It's not,
yeah.
it's a 2-year process.
Yeah. So the goal is to be fully divested by around 65 or whatever, and
At the
to
absolute latest.
yeah. Okay.
In our plan is structured. We're at 60. You have to start selling shares, and you can no longer own shares by the time you're 65.
Okay, and that's with all owners.
Everybody, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay, and so then and the goal is to have as many employees bought into the company as possible then, or who want to be at some point, right? Is that the goal there too?
I want all the right employees in it, and I think everybody, if you're hiring right, everybody should have that opportunity to be in. But you got to have the right partner. They got to understand what they're doing. You got to have skin in the game in order to go through and do it. So
yeah. So do you have some criteria in place before somebody can become an owner, before they become eligible? Essentially, is it they have to have been with the company for X number of years? Obviously, you've gone deep into the company. Do they have to be at a certain level within that org structure? Do you have any rules in place around any qualifications?
yeah, so there is a criteria factor on sitting down and going through. You know, you have to work for the business. You got to be part. You got to be part of the company. I think for any new hire, it's like anything else. You got to prove to us you live and role model the values. So you have to believe in our core purpose and live it. You have to be someone that someone wants to follow. So when we look at it, part of ours is a little bit through our performance management system, and doesn't matter what I think of someone else. It actually matters what their direct reports think of them and what their peers think of them and their clients think of them. That's far more important than, does Cory like having a beer with this person on a Friday, right? When you want someone to grow your business and go through it, do they have the ability to develop talent, attract work, and can they drive the needle on where your business is going and what it's doing?
So, do you guys have anything in there in terms of limitations on the percentage then that any single future holder, shareholder can actually have with the company? So it is divested, or is that just dependent on what happens in the future, basically?
Yeah, so I never put that in place. I am going to monitor that because I do want it spread throughout. When you put something in your USA, I mean, it's fixed. The minute you go to change it, everybody's got to agree on that. So, I didn't put that in place because, what happens if no one buys in, and at the end of the day, someone walks in and says, "Hey, Cory, I'm gonna buy the last 40% or whatever it is," and you have a cap at 20, say. So you have to look short term and you have to look long term. So you don't want to have it set up in such a way where it restricts you down the road and it's not you, restricts the company down the road, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not good for the company if something happens with the company.
Yeah. So what about the valuation? So you mentioned at the beginning you had it professionally valued, the company, so you could determine what those shares are worth. How often are you doing another valuation calculation?
So valuation happens every time there's a buy or a sell of shares.
Okay. And
same
again,
method, same approach.
Yeah. So you bring in the experts, get them to do the analysis again.
Yeah. You have an annual, realistically, you have an annual cost with that. That goes through. That's part of the cost of setting up one of these models.
Yeah. And so now in terms of the the employees that right now, you said that you have offered those same 5 that you had originally, you've offered some more or sold some more ownership to them. So you haven't added any more people as of yet into that initial group, but it's your plans to do so in the near future. And so you're still in that evaluation stage, or is it where you're just still trying to work out the mechanics of extending it?
No, it's not about the mechanics of extending it. So we're a relatively younger company, and the other part to it is time. If you've got to come in and you've got to buy in to into it, they really as an employee or someone, it's no different than you looking to invest in something. What's my return on equity? How long do I plan on working? So age has, well, not even age. When you plan on retiring or how many more years of working you have really factors into that. So, and it also depends on your risk level and your tolerance of risk, right? Some people, all great. I think we're going to go here in the next 4 years, or I think we're going to go here in the next 3 years, or, I have fairly high risk tolerance. Not everybody has my risk tolerance.
Yeah. So then in terms of lessons learned, is there anything that you would have done differently in the way that you've structured it today, what you've shared with us, now having gone through it for a little bit and lived with it for a few years?
No, actually, no, I wouldn't. It's working very well. We took our time, we planned it out.
That sounds like it.
I don't have a do-over on this. I'm really, really happy I did it. It is exceeding my expectations. I've got to put the reins on rather than the spurs a little bit. It's an interesting dynamic of, bringing on 5 partners and it's really good getting the new blood in, the new excitement. And it's not that they weren't before. It's just different when you have a vested equity. I don't care what anybody says. It is different.
And so with the change that you've seen with them, you said you have to put the reins on a little bit more. So they're really focused on growth then, I presume, is and taking those risks and so on. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, I probably made that sound worse than it is. But they're eager. They're finding new opportunities. They're looking at new things, process and development and stuff like that. We're firing on all cylinders as a company right now. And it's, one of the things I think that we did really, really well is that, and we're a construction company. I didn't look at this as a purely operational thing, even though 80% of probably our staff work on the operational end. I think it's really important to have the get work side, the keep score side of it going across. That way you have balance to the whole of an organization.
Yeah, and that's what you've done with your ownership group today, is you have people in every one of those areas, then the 3 areas. Yeah. So what would you say would be some of the things, some of the most important lessons that you've learned that would be important for somebody else to consider as they're going down this, besides, that really important one that you mentioned earlier, which is get some expert advice, talk to people who've done this before you, find out that. So what other, tidbits of information, lessons that you would share?
I think from the actual owner or the person doing it, be very clear, be very, very clear yourself on why you're doing that. That's more important than anything. If you can't answer why you're doing this, you're going to struggle with the questions you're asked on how to set it up. For me, I wanted time. I wanted to be able to delegate responsibility, and not that I didn't have people and responsible and accountable, but just, where they really, really own it, and they own part of the upside with it that goes, and the downside that goes with it, right? It's not just all upside. It's how are we going to handle different situations. That was probably the toughest question that I got asked. One of my partners asked me that. They said, "What is it you really want?" And it sounds like such a simple question. But when I first started it, I didn't really have the answer to that. I
Yeah.
didn't really know. I liked the concept of the idea. You sit and you look at our industry, and there's a few of the people that we compete with in our industry who have this model. And are you doing it because you're looking to compete, or what? Why are you actually doing this? What is it you actually want out of it? And for us, it was pretty clear. For me, it was pretty clear on doing it, and it was really about, I believe, building a better company.
Yeah. Well,
If an individual is good, a team is far better. And
yeah.
when you have a team all aligned, it works really, really well.
Okay, so I'm going to put you on the hot seat here with one last question, and that would be,
Sure.
what were some of the surprises besides, I guess, the positive one that you saw where everybody just was really eager and really driving the business forward? Was there any negative surprises there with the rest of the employee group or the management team or whatnot? Was there anything that surprised you as you were implementing this that you went, wow, I didn't see that coming?
Uh, none of it was a negative surprise, I would say. But what was an eye opener for me, I would say, is um, what was viewed as risk and tolerance of risk. So as we're going through this, construction markets going, we're 2 years in, a year in, we're into COVID, and the market's on a downturn, oil's going down. And I would say, I would, I would say, people don't think like you. If you're going to set this up as an entrepreneur and you look at it, do not look at it through the lens of what you would do and how it is. You have to look at it through the lens of a person who's coming in, who's not an entrepreneur. They might be entrepreneurial, but their risk tolerance and what they view as risk is on a totally different level than yours.
Yeah, and speaking of which, when you have them at the ownership table, they're going to get a vote in things. Now you're still controlling, I would
Yep.
imagine, the majority of the shares,
Yep.
and therefore you have more of the votes. But talk to me about that. And there will be a tipping point there when you do lose control of
Mm-hmm.
the company in terms of that. So um, are you worried about that? What are you doing to try to protect, yourself and the interests of the company or your vision for the company through that?
Yeah. So at the beginning part, I have a lot of control going through, and that's part of starting something new and sitting down and going through. Um, but you can only have so much control. I don't know how to word this. You can have all the control in the world, but then you're not getting the full value out of your partners, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily mean that. And it's a true partnership. If you're going to bring people in, you better be bringing in people in that are going to make a really, really good decision, in alignment with what you believe in. It goes back to your core purpose. It goes back to your values. If you align with a lot of those, and you have a culture that it's about driving the company forward, I don't think you run into that as much. We really try and focus on what's right, not who's right, and it's no different. Whoever has the right idea, whoever it is, that's what we do. So I think that depends a little bit on your worldview. But having said that, do you have to have some control of it going through? Yeah, you do. But you know what? At the end of the day, how much control do you really have? I'm eventually going to die. So, some could happen. There's a point where, you can think you're in control as much as you want, but really at the end of the day, how much control do you really have?
Yeah. Well, and it comes back to what I guess you were saying earlier around, hiring the right people. And those are the
Yeah.
people that you're going to have at that ownership at table. And so you know them,
Yeah.
you know that they're living the same values that
Yeah.
are important to the company. And so one would think then that you're going to, all find a way to make the right decisions, or a decision that everybody can live with and at that table, right?
I think for myself, the employee ownership is more a values-based decision than it's not a financial-based decision. It really is about what you believe, what your worldview is, and what you believe. So much of it is centered around that for me.
Yeah.
Because if you sit down and you look at it and it's all a financial-based thing, well, tell me how your USA looks. Tell me how all these things are structured. How are you going to at the end of the day, you have all the value, all the control, all the shares, and you want to divest it. So you've got to be willing to give up something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well put. And I think, it's a complicated topic. It's one that, like you said, you just have to do a ton of research. It sounds like you did. And so I know you'd mentioned at one point that you've talked to a lot of people who've done this before you. And so I'm just curious if you care to share your contact information for anybody who maybe would want to pick your brain a little bit more about your experience as they are trying to navigate through the same thing. I don't know if there's a email or social media handle or whatever that you'd like to share.
Yeah, so you can email me at cjodoin@jen-col.com.
Okay, well, that's a great place to, I think, end this episode. So again, thank you so much, Cory. I really appreciate it. And for those of you who are looking to catch up with Cory, you did receive his email address as you mentioned it. If you want to just spell that out, Cory, actually, just because your last name is maybe not as common for people to get, off the cuff there. So
Perfect. Yeah, it's cjodoin@jen-col.com.
And obviously, if anybody out there needs something built, needs a great construction company, well, we know who has really focused on the values, is focused on building a team around that. So give Jen-Col a call if you need anything there. So thank you very much. And thank you to everybody who tuned into this episode. If you liked what you heard and you want to learn more about other businesses, other entrepreneurs who are out there doing the same things that you are, learning some lessons along the way and are willing to share those lessons, then head over to amplimedia.com/amplify, and that will take you to an archive of all of our past episodes, and you'll also find our future ones there as well. Again, Cory, thank you so much, and stay safe, everybody.